Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Vincent Amazona. I'm the specialized trainer here at Care Indeed, and thank you for joining us on our webinar series. Definitely have a special one today. We are joined by Dr. Elizabeth Weiss. She is a psychiatric doctor, a PsyD, is that correct?
Psychologist, yeah.
Yes, psychologist, sorry. And she specializes in grief counseling, bereavement as well. And she'll be going over something that's very particular, especially given the season. It's transforming grief during the holidays. Dr. Weiss, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. You've taken a really important step by showing up. For those of us who are living with a profound loss, the holidays can be overwhelming. How do we manage getting through them without the person or people we've lost? At these important times built around the celebration with family and friends, we're acutely aware of their absence, of how they showed up during the holidays and cannot do so in the same ways this year or ever again. And it's especially hard if there are ruptures or unhealed aspects to the relationship. We've also lost the chance to heal those. This year, it's even more difficult with social restrictions for the pandemic. We have the additional loss of traditional ways we've interacted with important people in past years, and many of the opportunities we might have used to create new traditions aren't available either. But I want to say that the good news is that in showing up today, you're already inviting healing and growth. And ready for the first slide if you are. Grieving is the art and practice of transforming loss into renewed love. So often when we're going through it, it's just so overwhelming and powerful, and we can't imagine the future that we might want. There's so many different things going on that we can lose sight that you already know how to grieve. You already know how to do this. You've practiced all your life because the world is filled with gifts and their loss, from early losses like broken toys and leaving behind schoolmates, to the loss of people or animals, to death or divorce, as well as the possible loss of health or opportunities in your life. With each loss, you've developed skills in how to face the loss and how to move forward. Today, we will be working with a model that outlines the tasks we go through as we mourn a loss. For each task, I'll introduce tools to help you on your path and some that you may want to do with your family or friends, either online or in person. We often feel, and so let's just begin to look at those. So the model we're going to look at is WORDON'S task of mourning. And I know for me, so in addition to being a clinical psychologist, I also have had my own stories of loss, and it was through the hospice grief program for my husband that I was introduced to this. And it was as though bells went off, and all of a sudden I understood all that was going on and that I've been doing. And so the task, and what we'll do is go through each task and introduce you to some tools and things that might work for you with it. The first is to accept the reality of the loss. The second is to process the pain of grief. The third is to adjust to a world without the deceased. And the final one is to deepen your relationship with the deceased while embarking on a new life. So we'll begin with accepting the reality of the loss. This is one where even though we can accept the reality of the loss intellectually, we have to live through it in time and in different geographies to be able to accept it more fully. People often talk about things like, oh, I thought I saw them, or I feel like I just keep waiting for them to show back up. I really know they're dead, but I can't really accept the reality that they are gone. Part of this, if we look at it from a neuroscience model, is that most things in life change. The death of someone does not. And so we have to check in again and again with all the neural networks, and especially at the holidays. It's like, they were here, they're not. And people say things like, are you still dead? You know, it's like, how can they still be dead? It makes sense because most things change. And so we're wired to be able to check in again and again. Is this reality still here? With death, the answer comes back again and again, yes. And that takes quite a while to process. I also want to say that accepting they're dead doesn't mean at all that we're okay with their being dead. So the activity we're going to do first is naming our loved one. And in the chat box, if you want, or you can say it if you want, let's know the name of the person, the relationship, how long they've been gone, and something you love and cherish about them.
Okay. So we invite you all to participate. Feel free to share. Again, we'd love to see the name, the relationship of the person that you have lost, how long they've been gone, how long have they been away from you, and something you love and you cherish about them.
So just even naming the loss, naming the person, helps us let it be a little bit more real. Grief needs to be witnessed. We need to be honored. So often we feel isolated in our grief. Each of us has a unique relationship with that person. We have different levels of experience with grieving, and all of that's going to make each grief different. And so part of accepting the reality that they're gone is having people you can name it to, being able to talk with each other about what are the things you miss. And so some of the things we'll look at are how do we make that easier? The second task is to process the pain of grief. And if you're on this webinar, I can well imagine that you know just how tumultuous it can be. That can be the shock of the death. We're going to basically feel everything. So all the intense emotions, from sorrow to anger to grief to dismay to despair. We experience the strong emotions. We have many, many thoughts, and our bodies often react too. So when we go back on the street, sorry, I'm still on the first. Yeah, thanks. So, okay, here's another one. My good friend. Sorry. My good friend Mary passed away. I miss my good friend. I miss our laughter and shared stories. And I think so often what you're talking about is missing the joy. If you've seen the movie Inside Out, one of the things that happens there is that they're trying to show you how emotions transition. And so you have a young girl who has many happy memories, they move, and those memories get painted with sadness, and anger comes in, and all sorts of other emotions. And that's the thing that happens when we lose someone, is the memories that we had of joy are now combined with sadness. And so just giving ourselves really space to go through every emotion. Sometimes they'll be in rapid transition. Sometimes we can feel stuck for more periods. A lot of times people can object to how we grieve, especially if everyone's grieving the same person. It can be really difficult because they're at a different stage. Maybe you're ready to talk about it, they're not. How do we be together in our grief? And so sometimes we can be told we're grieving too much. We can be told we're not doing it right. But the reality is that grieving is very natural and healthy. That intensity is there because that's how much the person meant to us. That's the power and depth of our love. And so just knowing that however you're grieving, it's natural, it's healthy, it's the way it's meant to be. And it's not that we can't get help in places where we get stuck, and there are many kinds of help. But just understand that depth of sorrow, that anger, all those feelings are really normal. Sometimes this is one of the places where it's really important to have a lot of compassion for ourselves. People will talk about having unexpected thoughts and feelings, things they didn't want to, getting angry at their person, thinking just many, many different things. And I think just understanding, feel it deeply, hold it lightly. You are not defined by your grief. You're not defined by anything that you're feeling or experiencing in the given moment. And just understanding that this will pass, you won't be stuck here, and that there are ways you can decide what's the right level and way for you to grieve right now. it's an interesting balance we have of trying to go towards the grief and away from it. Sometimes it comes flooding in and we just numb and shut down. Numbness is an emotion too. So how do you balance that? A lot of people feel frustrated with the denial, and yet denial is a way of our body and mind knowing we're not there yet. We're not ready for it to be in our face all the time. And so just being patient with yourself, with where you are, and yet inviting, am I ready to take that next step? Am I ready to go towards feeling all the feelings? Because that's what's going to get you free and take you forward. So feel it deeply, hold it lightly. Don't let it define you, but just really allow it to be and let it pass on. We're going to do an exercise here. And what I'm going to talk about is writing prompts. There's so often many really good writing prompts and books and things that kind of invite us, take us that next level into stuff. And one that I like and I'm using here is David Kessler's Healing Grief cards. What you can do with these is either alone, where you might journal it, or with someone that you care about who understands, and can either listen or you can both do it. Look at the prompts and either journal it or talk it. We'll do one right now. Sometimes in grief, you have to grieve the life you thought you were going to have. So not only do we have them gone now, but all the dreams we held with them, all the hopes we had for them, all the images of them being there in our life year after year. We have to let go of that life and begin to transition to a life where they're not going to be. It's especially difficult at times of holidays, because it's at our holidays that we have so much more time together often, or not, but we have memories of coming together to celebrate, and kind of roles and activities that our person took regularly. And so one of the things I invite you to talk about now is, what visions and dreams of the holidays have you lost? While we're waiting for that, just want to honor another one came in. My sister, 2 years. I miss her kindness, her love, her beautiful smile. She was the last member of my family, and he was having family. Choir concerts, family traditions with mom at the center.
I think if I can,
Yeah, absolutely.
jump in, Dr. Weiss, that statement, sometimes in grief, you have to grieve the life you thought you were going to have. It hits a really strong note. Holidays are something that are always fixtures throughout the year, and then one always considers family to be ever present and certain, just as much as the time of day comes. Yeah. And when you lose one of those, you feel untethered by it. And I think this kind of sets you into that aspect of finding that closure. Like for me, with my cousin, we would play Santa, like the worst Santa possible, during Christmas for my daughters and for our nephews. It was one of those things where it doesn't come seriously. It just comes because of the time, because the people are there, the right combination of things. And to think that those things will carry on in and of itself adds to the grief.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those future Santa visits are going to be, something that would be difficult to try to carry on. I think that's one thing I hope we get to cover is, how do you carry on in a different tradition? How do you carry on in a different light now that there seems to be pieces missing of what once was?
Yes. And thank you for that, because I chose this one because that's what we're going to do when we get to task 3.
Okay.
And so we'll actually spend a little bit of time with that. But I think that's just such a beautiful example of naming his playing that bad Santa, that terrible Santa for your kids and nieces and nephews is going to be missing year after year. and those dreams of how it might have changed as your children got older, and just the different passage of time with each other with him in your life is part of what needs to be let go. And I think honoring that not only are you missing it this year, but there's all those dreams of what he would have done and how he would have grown and changed that we just kind of assume will be there. Don't know. Someone wrote Miss Out-of-Town Family, and I think that's a special part of grief this year is we're not able to go see each other. And so grieving this year is got an extra layer, because not only are we grieving the lost ones, we're grieving being with the people who shared the loss with us and being able to connect. And just as we're all here together on, Zoom, sometimes I call them Zoom-a-days this year because this is what we have. And so how can you make this process of connection transcend? So again, nothing can take away the reality that they're not here. You're not doing those things together of cooking and sharing in that same way. And yet, how do we create new traditions that allow us to go forward? Another part of grief, I think, that is so profound and that we don't always talk about is the physical part. And so often it can really affect our ability to eat. People so often lose weight when this happens. It can keep us up at night. Some people have the experience of nausea or vomiting. So I think the somatic or physical part of grief is really just a huge part that we don't always take into account. And here's something Vince has kindly offered to model some yoga. So this particular yoga, sometimes with yoga and sometimes with grief, again, we're always looking for that balance. Am I wanting to open up to it more? Am I wanting to close it? And I think because a lot of the activities that happen naturally during the holidays, as well as that we do as we go forward in life, open our hearts and feel the grief more fully. I also wanted to add something here. This is Yoga for Grief by Sarah Ezrin. That's going to actually help you close down the feelings and get centered a little bit more. Before we do that, I want to say a little bit about breathing patterns. It's amazing the breath system that we have. If we're feeling anxious, one of the best ways to work with it is to exhale longer than we inhale. If you're open to it, I'd like to try an exercise. We'll just ask you to allow yourself to breathe in normally, and then breathe out as long as you comfortably can. And then I'm going to ask you to hold it as long as you comfortably can, and then to take in a deep breath. So if you're feeling anxiety or things like that, this is a really good one. If you're having some of that somatic grief, this is a really good one to try to sort of release the anxiety. So again, just take a moment, allow yourself to take in a good deep breath, and then begin to exhale as long as you comfortably can. I see you going, that's a really good way to do it, because when you hiss, you can feel the muscles in your diaphragm, and you really want to squeeze out all the oxygen from the very bottom there. We actually store carbon dioxide. I think now you're probably holding it. So again, hold it as long as you comfortably can, and when it's right, breathe back in. We store carbon dioxide, and that raises our anxiety. So when you do this activity, and I'll invite you to take the second breath when you're ready. It's good to wait a few before you do. But when we can release that carbon dioxide, we actually calm our whole body down. So it's another good way to begin to shift the energy, to be more quiet or to not have some of the anxiety. So again, the pattern is inhale normally, breathe out as long as you comfortably can, hold as long as you comfortably can, and then breathe normally again for a few. What do you notice as you do that? Does anybody notice any shifts in their body?
I feel a change in posture
Hmm.
in order to allow and to to accommodate the extra breathing.
Yeah.
It's a more deliberate action. So the body compensates in that fashion.
Now that's a good one, that our body is just going to get a little bit more straight, feel more space. Yeah. Sometimes people describe feeling calmer, feeling less anxiety. And so this is a way to create more space for yourself, especially as we're getting together with loved ones and maybe feeling a little anxious about the grief, or, you know, the times that there would have been together with people. Here's a nice one. The tightness that comes from the extended exhale allows for more freedom for the following breath. Yeah. So just embracing that as a way to make more space for yourself. The counter, and I just want to mention this here, we don't need to do it now, but I want to mention the counter, and that's if you're feeling really down or you have that kind of heaviness of grief, there are a couple ways to work with that, and one of them is to, have you heard the breath of fire? I don't know if you've heard of that. It's where you breathe in and out just your nose very, very shallowly, very, very quickly. So if you want to try it with me, you can, where you just kind of go. Try it just a short time until you see how much you can do it, how it's comfortable. But that's a way you can kind of use the breath to energize you back. If you want to do it in a more gentle way, what you can do is just breathe in longer than you breathe out. So you could take in a breath, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3. And so those are some ways that you can just begin to work with the body grief, because so much of the grief does show up in the body. Vince, are you ready for our yoga demonstration?
I am. Yeah. Let's just walk me through it. I can do this.
Okay, so that's just great. And so a lot of times it's easier if you keep your feet close together, but open your knees a little bit wider. And again, for everybody, be careful with this. Don't do things, think about your doctor's advice. But these are some things that, if you do it in the way that feels good to your body, can help you calm down and relax. And so, Vince, you're doing great. And then lean forward so that your forehead's on the floor in front of you.
Okay.
And if that's not comfortable, then you may want to have a block or your hands or things so that you can kind of keep it up a little bit higher.
Where would my hands go?
Sometimes I'll put them under my forehead, so you can kind of do building blocks. Like I could see, perfect. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, how does that feel?
That feels good.
Okay. Are you feeling it kind of relaxing in your back and opening up, or is it feel intense? Tell me what it feels like.
My spine feels very relaxed, and then the position is kind of, I guess I'm rounding out, so maybe the breathing is kind of labored.
Okay. If it's comfortable, if you can go ahead and sit back on your heels, that's the way we typically do it. But if that's not comfortable, don't worry about it. And so while you're sitting on your heels, then keep in your forehead to the ground. If that's not what your body's comfortable doing.
No, I'm not capable of doing it.
Excellent. This is such a perfect example, because it's really finding the position that's just right for you. And so when you're this and it's in the level that's right for you, what do you feel? What do you notice?
A balance to it all.
Okay. And so this is one that can help us kind of calm down and relax, and again, adjust it to your body so that it feels right for you. The next one is called comfortable pose. And that's basically where you're just kind of sitting on the floor. So you can just sit back like that. And often people will cross their legs, the old kind of kids thing, crisscross applesauce, if you know that one. but whatever level is right for you. There you go, yeah. And then allowing yourself, again, like the posture you were talking about before, lifting up your shoulders and back. And this is it. You just get to stay here and relax. Notice your breathing. If anybody wants to join along, please feel free to join us. If you want to, you can lift up your arms as you inhale.
Straight up?
Yeah, straight up. And if it feels right, you can lean forward into your lap on the exhale. And then when you inhale, come back up. And exhale, come forward a little bit more. Come forward again. And this is an optional piece. If you prefer, you can just kind of sit there with your hands in your lap, on your knees. But if it feels good to do the arms and such, it is going to stretch out your back a little bit and help, the body align and soothe. Thank you. This is one that's really good. So one of the things that's beautiful with yoga is it's a way to work with trauma as well as loss. Sometimes when we've lost someone, there's a traumatic aspect of it. And we may see images again and again, may find ourselves reliving a certain moment again and again. And this activity is one that's really going to help realign the trauma system. So the PTSD response. So if you are finding yourself really struggling with some of those things, this is a particularly good one to do and try. Now I'm going to ask you to stand up.
Okay.
And then when you're ready, roll forward and just let your body relax. Your legs are going to be standing and you're going to roll forward like a forward bend. That makes sense.
So if I were from this position, I would be like that.
Yeah. And all the way down as far as is comfortable. Let your hands dangle on the floor. Like you're not going to touch your toes, but you're going to act as though you're going to touch your toes.
Okay.
And again, whatever is the right level for you, whatever feels good. This one's really nice. Just let your hands dangle, let them relax. Let your breathing be normal. How's this one feeling?
It feels good.
Okay. If your arms get tired of dangling, you can clasp your elbows. If they feel good, kind of loosening up, you can just kind of move them around. I know my granddaughter likes to be like a jellyfish here and just kind of wiggle her arms and such. Play with these and kind of fun.
Now, the idea, Dr. Weiss, here is it's yoga for grief.
Yes.
I find myself thinking of one of two things here.
Okay.
Am I doing this to escape that feeling and to find a distraction? Or am I putting myself in these positions, focusing on my breathing, my body position, to gain some sort of sense of control? Because I noticed at the beginning of our presentation, you had said, feel deeply, hold lightly.
Yeah.
Is this one of those ways that we're trying to hold lightly by carrying those thoughts, but at the same time doing an activity or something that's more inflective?
I love your questions. Yeah, this is great. This particular set is to allow us to return to calm. Because again, it's that balance of feel it deeply, and yet we also need a break from feeling it deeply. And I think one of the things that's so important is sometimes we just need to be able to have that break. So it's not so much a distraction. It's more a going into a different state of being. When we feel something powerfully, that's a really healthy process. And yet sometimes we can get stuck there or feel overwhelmed there, or we want to be able to go and be with people in a different way. And so this is a way to kind of return to a center. You can do things like remember who you were before the loss. It's again grounding to your full identity. You are someone with a loss. You're also someone who lives before and after the loss. And so these are kind of activities that can help you close the level of pain you're feeling. It's not, and one of the things I was saying is denial also has its purpose. We can't live in the grief all the time. This one is about giving yourself a break, being gentle with yourself, just allowing yourself to have a rest from it. Your grief will be there. Those feelings will return. And this is just a way to allow yourself to kind of have a break. I think this feels like a good time to shift from the yoga, because thank you so much for for being a volunteer.
Thank you for being my first yoga guide.
It's been really amazing just watching how some of the knowledge bases from cultures, so older, really knew how to deal with trauma and anxiety and just the different things that allow us to go through our life being who we want. Grieving is a process of moving from being completely absorbed by the loss to being able to reclaim our lives, our memories, to cherish life again. Think about it like a pie chart. When someone first dies, there's a way they take up 100% of our life. They're gone every single moment. That ache is with us every moment. Even if we're doing other things, a big part of our heart is still there in the grief. And over time, we're going to be able to have that grief, that need to put so much time and attention, a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. Part of what we're doing is, again, transforming it from the pain and shock and horror of the loss, from the missing, into it being a cherishing. So this is one of the ways that we can get a respite when the feelings are too intense and we need a break. We need to sleep to be able to heal and grow and create a good life. Many people like to do things before they go to sleep. So these are basically a way to get a respite, not to avoid, but to have that balance. This, I think, is one of the places where there's so many things to do for the holidays, because this is where we feel their absence so very much. There's the external aspects. Who's going to prepare the food? Who's going to cut this? Who's going to put up the lights? Who's going to be the Santa, to be the different things? And so part of what we have to do is, okay, the world is still here, my beloved is not. What are we going to do to address the task and things that they have left behind? We might choose to take them on ourselves. We might have other people begin to work with them. Sometimes in some years, it's just accepting it's not going to be. And when I work with people and hear the grief, for some people, it's like, this year, we're just not going to put up the tree or lights. It's just too painful. I'm going to just really cut back on what we do. Maybe we won't light the menorah this year. If we do, it'll be a really smaller kind of thing. And so I think part of it is just realizing you get to trust your pace. And again, so much of grief is pacing. maybe this is a year you're ready to take on that task that they left behind. Someone else is going to figure out how to do that piece. Others are going to just say, not this year. One of the really beautiful examples I know of this is some friends. The wife and mother died, and she had a habit every year of making these beautiful holiday scones and sending them out to everybody and this big party, and everybody would come and have a great time with it. And so everybody missed it, you know. And so what the family decided to do was to make them using her recipe and FedEx them to people all over, to the family and friends all over the country. And then they had a Zoom party where they could eat them together. And so it was a way of just kind of taking this loss and this missing of her to create a new ritual, that step forward. The other part is adapting to your new role and identity. And this is a place where there's a lot of loss. If you were married, you're now no longer a wife or husband, but a widow or widower. If you were missing a cousin, how do you identify with that? There's a place you're not a cousin to someone alive anymore. A child's lost, then you're always their parent, and yet how do you describe that to people and how do you live with it? And so much of our own self-identity changes with a profound loss. And that's part of what happens at the holidays too. We aren't the same person we were. If you were used to being married, then suddenly you're there as a solo person while other people still have their spouse. Same thing with a child. It's like to get together with the friends and families of the child you lost, as you might have in the past, or is that just too painful this year? And so part of it is knowing you're going to have part of it is you're going to have many years to live with this, and be patient and gentle with yourself this year. Find the right level of what you're going to want to do. Someone just mentioned relating to this with dementia. There's a wonderful term that embraces that, and that's that it is called ambiguous grief. They're still alive, and yet the person you could be with them, the way they showed up, is gone. So a lot of times people don't have that grief honored in that same way of like, yes, you are still missing that person in that role. You are still having to live without them as the person they were. And so absolutely, as we begin to lose people to age and illness, that grief work is there. I saw someone else just say, so yeah, absolutely, the stuff there relating, okay. I think another place where we're profoundly affected often is grief, loss, particularly if there's a traumatic aspect, can really bring up questions of, well, who am I now? What do I believe? Many people find it challenges their relationship to a God or higher power. And what do you do with that? What's the purpose and meaning of life? Do you believe that they continue afterwards? Do you not? Maybe you believed it before and now it's hard to trust, or the opposite. And so when we lose someone who's really precious, all of our life change, the internal, the external, and even how we define ourselves in relationship to the broader world. Because I think this is one of the ones, and it'd be really fun to hear different ideas of what are some of the roles that you're going to want to change. Like, what are some ways that your loved one contributed that made the hospital holiday special, and what are you going to miss most this year? Then maybe we can kind of brainstorm some ideas of ways to be with that loss. But what are some of the things people are anticipating missing this year?
I think maybe perhaps that there's a level of, what's it called? Feel free to share, guys, as well as jump in the chat if you need to. there's a lack of cohesion and more of an uncertainty. I'm not sure if the term ambiguous grief would apply in this case, in regards to having everybody still be there, but you are sort of mourning the loss of time. I think that's come to light in this year, that people are losing precious time with their loved ones.
Oh, yeah. You mean the loved ones who are still here, but because of the Zoom and pandemic? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could easily be said that the odds are stacked against someone, and in that regard, it could make it very, difficult or hard to envision something in the future when there's a larger than usual amount of hope that's required to believe that your loved one may be around, when things don't seem to be going well in a more public scale, I think.
That's a really good point to bring out, that we're all living with a level of ambiguity about what's what. Because the COVID-19 is so unpredictable in the response anyone's going to have. We're all living with a level of ambiguity that's more profound than we do day to day. It's like we have the impression that we know what's going to happen. We are losing precious time with loved ones, distant to this. And I think it's really that invitation to, how do we make it more meaningful? How do we find those kinds of things that are they can't compensate. There's nothing like being together in that way that we like to be. And yet, how can we allow it to be as special as it can? There's kind of the classic adage, accept what you cannot change, and then really embrace and commit to letting it be as good as it can. So I think having to accept, yes, it is ambiguous. We don't know who will be here next year. We don't know if this is the last holiday we might have spent together. Let's take the power of that emotion to invite us to create a good way forward. And so I think often when we think about emotions, we're just thinking about what we experience them as. And yet the purpose of emotions is to give us a message. When a message about maybe how to change our behavior. When we feel anxiety, it's like, okay, check and see what dangers are there. You're describing the anxiety of, will they be there next year? I don't know. They might not be. What do you want to do if that's a possibility? So if we feel anger says, you matter. Get angry when we lose a loved one because they mattered and we mattered, and it's really terrible. So this year, we're adjusting to not only the absence of the person we've already lost, but to the potential of losing others in the future in this coming year, and also the loss here now of the normal ways of getting together. And so I think, what are some ways that people can do it? I love my friend's solution of, making the scones and sending them anyway. Another family that I worked with, the daughter and wife who died had been a beautiful potter. And so what people did is they took some of her pottery and they did a Zoom where they all ate together. And they set a place for her with her pottery and used that as part of the table across, so everybody could feel her presence in that way. And so I think it's really accepting that invitation to creativity of, how do we make it meaningful? How do we envision a path forward that really cherishes it? One of the things that I do for my grandkids and children is buy them Christmas presents from Grandpa, because they shared certain things. Like my granddaughter loved playing Lego, and okay, he gives her Legos or those builder kinds of things, or those things that honor his legacy. And in a moment, we'll be getting more into that, sort of how do you keep that person alive in your lives. But I think the holidays are such a time of giving. The giving is often physical, but it's also the characteristics and traits that matter so much. And what do we do to keep those things alive too? Just want to check. Oh, how special, the reminiscing. Yeah. Yeah. It's a real great to have the
Yeah.
times of memory. Yeah.
I think that the one Janine shared in the chat really speaks to the experience of the older generations and being that family knowledge keeper, that storyteller for everyone. But then again, it's meant, right, that the next generation fills in. It's kind of the way time works. Touching on this, um, your third point here is how will you and your family and friends adjust to their absence around this? And to sort of take a step back, there was the talk about adapting to new roles and identity. There's two things about that I find sort of interesting, or not sort of interesting, I just don't want to call them peculiar. Is this the way that people will find on, let's say, for instance, there was a family member or a father figure who made the centerpiece for the dinner, like you said, and maybe they don't have a main dish this year, either in honor or because that was always his participation.
Yeah.
To say that it's not about that, it's just we were trying to honor that, and then going on to that point where you said, denial is your body telling you that you're not ready to accept it. Do these tasks function to take those steps again forward into both ownership, whereas it says by taking ownership now, you're now becoming the steward of that, you are now filling that role, you're sort of not replacing in a sense,
Right.
but taking on that role, as well as being able to let go. By absorbing that role, you understand that, yes, I can take part in this, I can continue that legacy. The physical person is no longer really necessary to partake. Is that sort of these tasks that we should take upon in little steps, rather than just denying ourselves that no, we don't want to participate in this, or we don't want to have that because technically we're not ready to process and admit. I just find that kind of, time does always move people forward, and like you said, it takes time for people at their own pace. But I think these trains of thought sort of prime you into
They
that
do.
open mind.
They do.
Okay.
And I think it's that growth mindset, that accepting the invitation that no matter how much we want to resist and not let it in the truth that they're gone, they are. It's important to respect that sometimes we need to just be caught in the denial and the feelings of it, because there's important work that's happening there too. But as we can, we're going to do better. We're going to begin to do that transformation of the loss into that deeper, more beautiful love. So many people, when they begin to write the stories of their loved one, or as families, we begin to work it through, we come to honor and cherish that person in a whole new way. And so when we're living with them, we can just assume they're there and those gifts are there. And then when they're gone, it's like we begin to cherish them more. The thing that holds us trapped in grief or in trauma is avoidance of feeling things. And so it's this funny kind of balance of, yes, we need to go forward. We need to feel it, because the sooner you feel it, the sooner you have an integrated whole life again. And yet, when we're not ready, we're not ready. One of the things that makes holidays complicated is you may be ready to go forward and have that centerpiece by someone else, but others may not. And so how do you work together as a family with the fact that everybody's in a different state of grief, everybody's processing things differently? How do you work together as a team that invites more healing and yet also honors that some people need the space to be where they are? Is that kind of addressing what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. It's like slow bits of ownership. And with that, there comes an understanding that there must be a another person to bear the torch in order to keep that memory going. And a greater understanding for that person's legacy, what they left behind. But also showing to either the family or the community that we can move forward, and it's not necessarily the end because there's a physical gap missing.
Yeah.
We have a good share here from Kristen Mullen. My mother-in-law made the holidays so special. She baked many different holiday cookies and treats. She has Parkinson's disease and dementia. She has 24-hour care. My father-in-law is lost as she held everything together. I think that's a huge common theme when it comes to the matriarchal side of the family. There's typically roles that were given, especially in previous generations. So now he must be lost because he's also isolated. Kristen says that we can only be with him via Zoom. My kids are missing their cousins and their grandmother's holiday dinners and treats. So this would be a good way to kind of take that step forward in finding ideas on how to address it. Kristen,
it is. It is. I also just want to take a moment to honor the power of each of those losses that stated. It's just taking a moment to grieve each part of that. The missings and things like that. And it's interesting because as we allow space to grieve those losses, often the answers come out. I saw another share where someone said the granddaughter was beginning to make the cookies. People are beginning to step up and express the person there. It is hard, and especially with the pandemic, that we can't surround and kind of help people through the things in the ways that we used to. And just having to honor that is true now. Even as we try to figure out ways to compensate or do the best we can.
I think people will always find a way when it comes to finding connections. And perhaps, I think we had this discussion yesterday, that may be the big gift of one person's loss, is people coming together to fill in that gap.
Yeah.
You spoke of honor, and we had a share from Renata talking about her friends and family for her friend Mary gathering over Zoom to honor, cherish, and remember their friend. So definitely, these are wonderful shares, everyone.
Thanks so much,
good
everybody.
space to be in.
So I do think it's right. Let's begin to look. Task 4 is, and what you'll see with each of these tasks is they all blend together. I know for me, when I first began to hear them, I was like, oh, that explains what I've been doing all this whole time. And so it just gives us, I think so often when we want to develop a skill, being able to label it and know the parts and pieces makes it a little bit easier to get that mastery. And that's why I like the idea of like transforming grief. It's like, this is what you start with. Everyone here has grieved many people and things before. One of the invitations I give you for after this is go back and think of all the people you've lost. And what did you learn about how to grieve that can inform you in your grief now? And so that's something you can kind of do in looking at these different tasks. You know, what did you learn from prior griefs that allow you to do better now? This one, I think, is really one of the places where I see people who've done a lot of good healing and going forward in the practical sense. The level of peace they get really seems to transform with this one, of just accepting the physical person is gone, and yet your love for them is not gone, nor is their impact on your life and on the world outside of you through you. Again and again, how many people have had the experience of feeling you met someone who was already dead because of how much somebody loved them? And it's like, we really do have that ability to keep them alive and how we live and honor their heritage. So I think here, loved ones die, love does not. And I think just really embracing that, because we feel, oh, there's no one here to love me. And yet as we begin to open up, that love is still there, and we can feel it and experience it today. Many people talk about experiencing their presence. It can be something as simple as, oh, I just feel like they're here. Other people say, oh, they give me flowers. All of a sudden, there's a flower or pennies. It's as unique as a relationship. I know we live in such a rational world that sometimes it's hard to hold that without skepticism. And yet what we find is over a third of people do it anyway, and that it seems to be profoundly healing. So just finding peace with, although there may be different ways of understanding it, just accepting that it is something that kind of gives comfort. One of the things I think that also really helps a lot, how many people here actually talk to the people they love who died? I'm curious. And if that's helpful for you. Maybe a place people feel shy.
When you say talk to them, do you mean like reach out to them, or speak to them directly, or just talk knowing that when you would talk in that fashion, they would typically be the one that would be hearing this type of conversation?
There are different ways to, great question. There are different ways to do it, but sometimes people will just tell their person, I miss you. This is terrible. How could you be gone? whatever it is. It's like, well, I know you would be doing this today, and I just miss you. Or what are you doing? Where are you? Just expressing whatever it is. So here's people that used to get advice and things like that. And so we all have an internal model of that person and who they are and how they would be. And many people find it helpful to just talk to them. So often there's that person, that trust, that intimacy we had with that person, that no one else is going to ever fill that role. And so the things that we would have said to them, where do we put them? And so one of the things I find is that talking to those people out loud or in your mind and heart really seems to help us process the grief and transform it and feel closer again to them. Many people find that they do it more at the beginning and it's less necessary later. Other people do it throughout the rest of their lives. And so I think, again, grieving is unique. Find what's right for you, but really invite you to try, if you're feeling kind of stuck or missing them, just talk to them and see what happens for you. Does that answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I think another thing is celebrating their legacy, and there's so many ways we can do this, in carrying on the patterns that they did at the holidays. Many people like to do it more formalized, like through donations or gifts. Another way that we can do it is to take on characteristics of who they were that may not have been something so natural or who we were before them, but we notice they would be bringing this characteristic here, and maybe I can invite it in myself and honor them through becoming more like them, talking about them a lot, things like that. Trying new approaches that might become new traditions. This is a place that's much harder. The incredible pressure to try to balance everything with the current holidays and people, elders and things, and so that balancing there. I just really want to acknowledge how hard this set of holidays is, and again, accepting that we can do only what we can do. I think it's so hard to forgive ourselves when we're dealing with grief because we want to make it perfect. We want to make it right. We want to make it the ways that it was. And we can't. We can't accept that we can't have what it was and be gentle with ourselves as we invite these new ways of doing it.
Okay.
Oh, here's a beautiful share from Sylvia. Midway from working from home and the overwhelming pressure to keep the homebound elders up rather than sink into depression due into shelter in place, I burst into tears and said, I miss my mommy. And then I laughed. I'm 73 years old of age. Yeah, that's just so beautiful. That's exactly the kind of thing that's healing and allows us to go forward. Here's one that is very special and is a tradition across many cultures, and that's lighting candles together. And gratefulness.org is a lovely organization, and one of the things they offer is a free way to light a virtual candle. And Vince has offered to walk us through this. You can do it as a group, you can do it as individuals. What we'll do, and I'd like each of you to do this that has access to a computer right now. So if you'll just take a moment, bring this website up and light a candle with us. So it's gratefulness.org/light-a-candle. Okay, thanks for putting the link there. Yeah.
Okay, so the link is there, everyone, in the chat. Feel free to go ahead and click on it. I'll be sharing my screen as well for those of you that don't have access to the website through your mobile devices or due to your circumstance, maybe you're on the phone. So we're here at this page, gratefulness.org /light-a.candle or -candle /. We'll go ahead and click begin.
Actually, let's start with view candles so people can get a sense of what it's like. And while we're doing this warm-up, I invite you to think about who or what you might want to light a candle for, and how you're going to want to do this. But here's ones that people have lit. They're up for 48 hours, and each person has different things to say. So some here are about grieving, others are about many, many other things. You'll notice that some are lit, some are short, and some are unlit. Let's pick any, Vince, will you pick any of the ones that are lit so we can kind of go in and look and see what one might be like? So here's one that I don't know what the person said, but you'll get a chance to write whatever is right for you, and to share it with anyone. So you can share these with your family. You can set up a time with your family where everyone gets to light a candle together. So it's a nice way to kind of create an online community. Do we want to check another one just to see? Maybe there'll be one we can actually understand what they say. Rest in peace, dearest ones. Thank you. Will you go ahead and set this one up as a mini candle so we can kind of see what that looks like for people?
Oh, yes.
I just want to get through the practicals before we actually do it together as a powerful ritual.
Does that does that show up on my screen?
I
think it's because it's a separate window.
Okay. So what that will do is set a little separate window so that you can have it while you do your other computer work. So it allows you to be with your candle throughout the day as you work with stuff.
So yeah, that's the
there you go.
candle
Yeah.
there on the top left.
Yeah.
And that will stay open. And if you see, it's an exact model of the one that's on the main page. So if we should click out of this, that will stay on your desktop for you in order to reflect or maybe remind you of the intention from which you lit this candle.
And so let's go back to candles. And I invite you to take a moment. You'll have a chance to select one of the candles that's not lit. Think about what you might want to say, the feelings, and they'll give us chances to do that too. Just take a moment now. See which candle you may want to click. When you're ready, click one of the ones that's not lit. I think for me, it's such a privilege to be with each of you, sharing the gifts of loss, those that we knew before, and this incredible process grieving in ways that invite wholeness again. So I think in my heart, I'm lighting this candle for all of us on this shared journey of loss and love. Whatever message you want to write. I think here's a good one to put care indeed, so that anyone that wants to find out later, the candle. You'll be able to search for these later to send them to others if you want them to join with you. You filled out your form, you can go on to the next part. Want to put a note in the chat, feel free.
Okay.
If you want to, you can share the candle with people. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. If people want to stick around for questions and answers, we can do that. If you prefer to go and be with your candle or go on with your day, that's fine too.
I think this was a very lovely way to tie all of this together. I think finding this through you was really a great gesture, because a lot of this, the struggle of losing, and then the struggle and sometimes burden of having to let go and move forward, presents nothing but tumultuousness in our mind. And something as simple as a candle and a single flame can be very solitary, but also a focal point for light in a dark room, at the risk of sounding like a Hallmark card. But Dr. Weiss, we really appreciate what you've done for us today.
It's been a deep pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for this honor.
And this was definitely a great participating crowd. We really appreciate all of your shares, to come in and open yourselves up, and maybe have to experience some things that you perhaps weren't ready to experience, but put yourself in a good position to take that next task and find acceptance. Like Dr. Weiss said, feel deeply but hold lightly. So, Dr. Weiss has a website. I'll put her email address and her website in the chat. Again, Dr. Elizabeth Weiss, clinical psychologist. She's currently taking telehealth only, so we greatly appreciate your time, and we'll make sure that all the information, the links that we've presented ourselves with, will be distributed to our social media feeds, as well as on Dr. Weiss's page. All right. Thank you, everyone. And Dr. Weiss, thank you again. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too. Bye.